So we were looking at how to purify silicon and then how to make silicon into a single crystal from the naturally occurring ore which is plentifully available on the earth, which is sand. So from sand to single crystalline silicon wafer, that is what we have seen in the last class. Now no matter how much care that we give to all the processes that we discussed, still there will be some kind of imperfections inside the crystal. Okay, so let us look at some of the imperfections in the silicon crystal. Okay, the number one imperfection is that when we discussed the silicon crystal, we said that it will all the silicon atom will sit in certain positions which are described as diamond lattice structure. But in practice, what happens is that because of the non-zero temperature, okay, the atoms which are sitting at the lattice points, they will not be static, they will be vibrating. Okay, so due to temperature, the silicon atoms in the lattice points will not remain will not remain as static. That means they will move, they will vibrate. Okay, so they will vibrate, and the amplitude of this vibration, so they will vibrate in their mean positions, and the amplitude of this vibration will depend on the temperature. So as the temperature increases, the vibration will also increase. Okay, and this will influence the working of this will influence the properties. Especially we are interested in the electrical properties. So electrical properties will be affected by these vibrations. These vibrations are called lattice vibrations. This lattice vibration will influence the conduction properties. Of silicon crystal. Okay, so that is number one. Now apart from this temperature effect, we will have various other defects which will be present in the crystals. So there are different types of defects. So these are not intentionally required things, but they happen to exist in a statistical way when you fabricate these crystals. So defects in silicon crystal, and the defects could be classified into various categories. So what I will do is that I will show with the help of a site, so the types of defects. So this is a online site you can access, which is showing the different types of crystal defects or crystalline defects in silicon. So crystals inherently possess imperfections. So that is what we are looking at. We can these imperfections inside the crystalline nature can be called as crystalline defects. They are undesirable. Okay, when you make wafers, they are undesirable. But certain defects are introduced also for engineering the property of the silicon crystal, that we will see. Doping, I already told you. So doping is replacement of the silicon atom in the lattice points with the impurity atom from say fifth group or third group element. Those are intentionally introduced defects. Okay, so that is desirable, but there are defects which are undesirable, but come into existence during the fabrication of the single crystalline silicon. Okay, so what are the type of defects? So defects could be classified based on the dimensions. Okay, if the defect is of 0 dimension, we call it point defects. If it is one dimensional defect, then we call it as line defect. Then we have 2-dimensional defect, which is called area defect, and 3-dimensional defect, which is called volume defect. So we can classify defects into 4 categories. So number 1, point defects, that is 1-dimensional. And point defects itself can be classified further into many categories. Number 2, line defect. So point defect is 0-dimensional defect, and the line point defect is 0-dimensional defect, and line defect is 1-dimensional. And then number 3, 2D defect, or you can also call it as area defects. Area or 2-dimensional defect. Finally, we have volume defect or 3D defect. So this classification is very clear. It is on the basis of the dimension of the defect. Okay, so what are point defects? Okay, let's look at it. So point defects, as I said, can be of different types. Number 1 is vacancy defect. Number 2 is interstitial defect, and number 3 is Frenkel defect. Okay, so you can have number 1 vacancy, then interstitial, and then Frenkel, and then one more, and that is extrinsic defect. So what is vacancy defect? Vacancy defect is that in the lattice, at one particular lattice point, the atom is missing. Okay, so we know the diamond structure of silicon. Imagine that a point where silicon atom was supposed to be there. So it's basically absence of silicon atom. A single atom is absent at a lattice point. Interstitial means in addition to the atoms in the lattice point, there is an additional atom somehow entered into the crystal, and it is residing in the space between the lattice point. So there is always some kind of free space available between the atoms. So if one atom somehow enter and sit, so additional atom, presence of additional silicon atom in the interstitial space means the space, void spaces which is created when you put many atoms together. There will always be some void spaces in between. So in that interstitial space, if an additional atom comes and sits, so that is also a 1D or 0 dimensional defect or point defect, because it is only at one particular point. So that is interstitial. Now what is Frenkel defect? Frenkel defect is a case where you have a silicon crystal which is perfectly made, and then what happens is that one atom which is at the lattice point, from one particular lattice point, it moves out of its place and go to some interstitial space, so creates a vacancy in the at a lattice point and create an additional atom in the interstitial space. So it is basically a combination of vacancy and interstitial. So basically one atom somehow, instead of sitting in the lattice point, it has gone and sat at the interstitial space due to drift of lattice point silicon atom. It is a drift of lattice point silicon atom at the interstitial space. So it's a combination of vacancy and interstitial. Now let's look at what is extrinsic. So let me just read. So all of this are intrinsic point defect, the first three, vacancy and interstitial defect, and then Frenkel defect. All of these are intrinsic point defect. Now now extrinsic point defect is basically when you dope a boron atom into the silicon atom, boron atom will take some of the places where silicon atom was already earlier present. So that is basically intentionally introduced impurity. Okay, so it could be intentionally introduced, or it could be like unwanted impurity atoms also. So extrinsic means replacement of silicon atom with the impurity atom. Okay, so these are the different kinds of point defects. Now let's look at what are the 1D defects, which is also called line defect. Okay, so one of the category of the 1D defect is dislocations. Okay, dislocations. It could be a straight dislocation or dislocation loop. Okay, so edge dislocation. So edge dislocation is described as an extra plane of atoms squeezed into a part of crystal lattice. Okay, so there is you imagine a perfect crystal with the all lattice point in place, but now imagine that an additional plane of atom is somehow entered in between. Okay, so and that would create a dislocation line, and it is better. Okay, so dislocation, if you want to understand, you can see something like this. So this is called a screw like. So you can see that instead of the top layer aligning properly with the bottom layer, it got shifted by one lattice constant, and then so this is what is called dislocation. So generally this is what is called dislocation. So some kind of slip in the crystal lattice structure. So that is called screw like slip. And similarly, if there is an extra plane that is partially, it is not fully entering but only partially, so you have to imagine a full crystal, and then you imagine that there is a layer which is say existing halfway between an additional layer. So let me try to draw this and show a little bit. So it could be a slip, or it could be due to an extra layer, slip in layer, or an extra layer. So slip in layer I have already shown the picture, but if you want to see an extra layer, so let's see that these are the and then so there is an extra layer that has come like this. Okay, so this is a picture that can so this is a cross-sectional view. Okay, so if you look at so this is one plane, this is another plane, and this is a third so this is a third plane, and this was our fourth plane and fifth plane. Now you see that there is an additional layer which is created like this. Okay, so this is terminated like this. So this is an extra layer in addition to all the layers which is extending from left to right, but this is terminated somewhere in between. And because of that, if you look at, there is a 1D defect. So this is a cross section, and if you look at the side view or through this portions, you will see that there is a line which is getting terminated. It is not continuing to the left. Okay. So that is that shape is like a line, therefore it is classified as a line defect. Okay. Now let's look at what is area defect. So area defect also has various types. Grain, like in polycrystalline, like there are certain regions which are differently oriented. Okay, grain boundaries we have discussed. Then stacking fold. Okay, so that I need to discuss. So area defect is mainly due to stacking fault or grain boundaries, twin boundaries. So stacking fault means what? So if you look at your so area defect is of two types. So grain boundaries, that you already know what it is. So different regions inside the crystal has different orientation. And there are boundaries inside the it is inside each grain. It is a perfect crystal, but the entire thing is like divided into different grains, and then so it is no longer a perfect crystal. The other thing is stacking fold. Okay, stacking fold. So what is stacking fold? So we have seen multiple ways of looking at the FCC structure. Okay, and there is one more way you can look at it. So let me just so that will somehow explain. So if you imagine these circles are silicon atoms, and we are arranging them by putting them close to each other like this, and then the next one we will put like this. Okay, so this is one layer that I am showing. So this is layer 1. Atoms are arranged like this. Then on the top of this we have another layer. So this will be put like this. So wherever this so you imagine you putting balls like this, and then you have a okay. So you can call this the first layer as the A layer and the second layer as the B layer. Okay, like this. Now the third layer, you have an option to put either above the A layer, just above the A layer, or you could put in a slightly different way like this. Okay, so that is called C layer. Okay, so A, B, C, and then above C again you will have a layer coming. So that is another point of view of looking at this diamond structure. So it will have a sequence. If you look at each plane, there is each plane can be considered like an arrangement of spherical balls, and on the top of that you can arrange another layer of spherical ball by putting them in above the interstitial space. Okay, and the third layer you can either put on the top of the A layer, exactly on the top of the A layer, coinciding with the A layer, or you could put it in a separate there will be another interstitial space which is not covered by the B layer. Okay, so A layer will have two kinds of interstitial spaces on which B layer will be put in one of them, and there is one left out, and that, so as you can see in this picture, I don't know whether it is very clear. So so there is another interstitial space which is not covered by the B layer but on the top of it. Okay, so then we will have ABC stacking. This is called ABC stacking. Now you can achieve the same packing density by having AB stacking also. Okay, AB stacking as well as ABC stacking both has same amount of packing density, but only thing is that this is more like the number of nearest neighbors will be different in these cases. Okay, so these are two alternate way of stacking, and so what will happen is in stacking fault is that instead of following the pattern ABC, suppose one of this layer is missing, or one of this, so instead of after A, B, instead of C coming, if A comes, so ABC was the supposed sequence. So stacking fault means that so you will have A, B, C, and then A has to come, and then B, but instead of C, now if A comes, and then A, B, C, so there is a stacking fault. Okay, so that is also a 2D defect. Okay, so stacking fault pertains to the disturbance in the regularity of stacking of plane of atoms in the crystal lattice. So this usually occurs when a plane is inserted into or removed. What I showed is removal of C. Okay. So additionally, you can talk about another layer getting introduced also. Insertion of extra plane in the stacking plane, and okay, so that is the 2D fault. So this will have consequence in the device operation. Now grain boundary refers to transition or interface between crystals whose atomic arrangement different orientation. That already I said when we discussed polycrystalline. So if the crystal has got different grains within, then it is no longer purely crystalline, it is polycrystalline. So that is another 2D fault. Now coming to volume defect. So what are the different types of volume defect? Precipitates and voids. Okay, precipitates and void. Precipitates of extrinsic. So there are point defects which we discussed. Okay, that is void is one kind of point defects, and then also interstitial defects. Okay, these are different point defects. And out of this, if there are different voids in different places in the crystal, and somehow they move together, and all of them come to one particular place, and that will create a big void. And there is often that tendency, if there are many point defects, there is a tendency for these point defects to come together and create a bigger void. So bigger void means it is no longer a one-dimensional thing; it becomes a three-dimensional void space. It's as if there is a bubble inside the crystal. So some region, the many atoms are absent in the crystalline. So that is what we call as precipitate. So usually in chemistry, what is a precipitate? It is something that agglomerate, right? Many smaller particles try to agglomerate and become a bigger particle or bigger substance, which we call as precipitates. Okay, so similarly, all these point defects, they will come together, and then they precipitate and create a bigger vacuum inside. Okay, bigger void inside. So which is called which is one of the volume defect. And whenever there is a defects, this will basically create what do you call stress. Okay, because the atomic arrangement has to, it is not regular, so therefore it has to certain layers has to be stretched. For example, if you look at here, because of this additional plane that has extra layer has come in between, what will happen? There will be stress for this will be pushed away like this, whereas there will be compression in certain other places. So there will be different kinds of stress. Either it will be tensile or it will be compressional in nature. So these kind of forces will happen, and that will affect the flow of electrons through the crystal. These kind of stress so much control or determine the flow of electrons. So these are the different. So volume defect, as I told, it is mainly precipitate. So precipitates of 1D defect, or not 1D, 0 dimensional or point defects. Or similarly, you can have external impurity atoms. They can also come together and create a space where it is no longer silicon, but it is a different material altogether, because all the impurity atoms. So precipitates can be voids or it could be impurity atoms. Okay, so those are the different types of imperfections in crystal after we make, and because of this lot of effects are there in the electrical properties, which we will look later. Now we are going to move into a new topic which is basically trying to understand how the electrons would behave in the crystal. Okay, now again we will assume that it is a perfect crystal, and if you put electrons into the if you put charged particles like electrons into the crystal, then how will they behave? So that's what we are trying to understand. And in order to understand this, we need the basic governing equation, and the governing equation for microscopic particles like electrons is quantum mechanics. Okay, so normally the mechanics means what, or mechanics or dynamics of a particle moving in a space is actually decided by Newton's laws. So that is our everyday experience is captured by Newton's laws of motion. Okay, but we can't apply those laws for the understanding of movement of electrons inside the crystal. So they follow a different principle or a different law of nature, which is what we call as quantum mechanics. So quantum mechanics is the mechanics of particles like or it captures the mechanics of particles like electron, or in general we can say microscopic particle. So just like we have Newton's laws, the governing equation which captures the law of motion of microscopic particles like electrons is called Schrödinger equation. So we need to little bit understand about quantum mechanics, and then all the characteristics of material, the electrical properties of material are understood with the help of quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics is the principle by which electrons are governed. Okay, it is no longer Newton's law. Newton's law, if you try to apply, you can't understand many of the phenomena. Okay, Newton's law is limited to macroscopic world, not to microscopic world. Okay, it can very well explain whatever is the mechanics or the dynamics of particles or objects like a ball, tennis ball, or a stone thrown, or maybe even planets and this kind of objects. You can understand everything about its motion, where they will be at a particular time from now. After that much amount of time, where will be the satellite, or where will be the ball. So all these things you can understand very well with the help of Newton's laws. But what about electrons? If you want to say where is going to be electron, or at such time, you can't use the Newton's laws to find that out. Okay, if you try to do that, it will be a failure. In fact, some of those questions are also not a valid question. It is really not right to ask where is the electron at such and such time, because electrons are not just like you can't even model electrons as a point particle, which has a definite momentum and location, etc. Okay, electrons in certain contexts it will behave like a wave, and therefore asking where is the electron is not a valid question anymore. Okay, so all of these aspects of microscopic particles are captured by quantum mechanics, the theory of quantum mechanics. And theory of quantum mechanics is very vast, and we will only go into in a very very shallow level of using quantum mechanics to calculate, just to familiarize some of the basic ideas. Okay, so why we need quantum mechanics? So that is what I was trying to tell you, why we need quantum mechanics, why Newton's laws are. So I will give you an answer to this question by different example. Answer 1, photoelectric effect. For example, photoelectric effect, I believe all of you know what is photoelectric effect. It cannot be understood by classical. So what is opposite of quantum mechanics is classical mechanics. Now classical mechanics has two parts. One is basically the part which I said, Newton's laws. Okay, classical mechanics is basically Newton's laws, and secondly, classical mechanics also has the wave theory of light, right? Wave theory of light, electromagnetic theory of light. So it's a combination of both. So there is particle mechanics, which is governed by Newton's law, and then there is electromagnetism, which governs electromagnetic waves. So, or wave theory of light. So it is both particle mechanics. So that is number 1, and number 2, wave theory. So pretty much everything in the classical world could be. So particle mechanics is basically Newton's laws. Okay, and wave theory you have studied like things like Huygens principle. If it is a scalar wave, it could be vector wave like electromagnetic wave. Okay, so it could be scalar, it could be vector, such as EM theory. Okay, so all of these different theories could be was sufficient to capture most of the phenomena in the nature, but photoelectric effect cannot be explained by either wave mechanics, because photoelectric effect is light interacting with matter. Okay, so what is photoelectric effect? You have light falling. Okay, so this is light falling on some material. Okay, and then electrons coming out of the material. Okay, so this is way I am denoting it. So electrons are coming out of the material. Light is falling on the material, and electrons. So light is falling, and electrons is coming. So this is some material. Now, what's the problem with this effect or this phenomena is that when you give certain colors of light, color means certain frequencies of light, no electrons comes out, no matter how much intensity of the wave that we apply. So intensity means for a wave there are various properties, like if I just throw a wave, it has an amplitude, it has frequency, etc. So this is called the amplitude, and intensity is basically proportional to a square. Okay, so larger amplitude means large intensity. So that's why, like if you want to increase the brightness of light inside a room, if you you take a higher wattage bulb. Okay, so that will give you more brightness, more intense light. Okay, so by increasing the intensity, you feel that we are giving more energy. Okay, that's the classical way of thinking, right? In the wave theory of light, if you have higher amplitude or higher intensity, then it is more energetic, and therefore you can take out the electrons out of it. But what is observed is that it is frequency dependent. Whether the electrons will come out of the material is actually determined by whether the frequency of light that we introduce is sufficiently large. So there is some kind of connection between the frequency of the light. So frequency is basically 1 by time period. So this is the time period. So 1 by t is what is called as f. So if the frequency is greater than some minimum frequency, then we see electrons coming out. Okay, but if the frequency is lesser than that value, the electrons will never come out, no matter how intense the beam is. But if the frequency is smaller, say for example, suppose that minimum frequency is like green. Okay, so if you give red light, no matter how intense it is, so red light has larger wavelength or smaller frequency. So no matter how much intense red light we irradiate on the material, the electrons will never come out. Okay, but even if it is a feeble green light or a violet light, electrons will come out. So it is not the intensity that determines whether electrons will come out. It is basically the frequency that determines electrons. So this could never be understood by any of this existing theories in classical mechanics. So classical mechanics, as I said, it has two parts. One is the particle mechanics and the other is the wave theory. So none of this could explain what is going on. And an answer to this problem was actually put forward by Einstein, where he said that light consists of particles, okay, which are called photons. So that's what he said. So light is, so quantum idea is this, quantum mechanical view of this phenomena, which can explain everything very well. So light is, or light consists of particles called the quanta of light. These particles are called photons, and the energy of these particles, the energy of these particles is given by h nu. Okay, energy of this particle is given by h nu. So I can write it as E of the photon is equal to h nu. It can also be written as h cross omega. Now what is the difference between h and h bar or h cross? H cross is basically h by 2 pi. and omega is basically 2 pi f. So if I multiply h cross omega is h by 2 pi into 2 pi f, or I used nu for frequency, let me be consistent. Okay, 2 pi nu, h by 2 pi into 2 pi nu, so the 2 pi's will cancel and you will basically get back h nu itself. So it's essentially same formula but written in a slightly different way. So this is his explanation. So light is built up of particles which are called photons, and the energy of the particles is given by h cross omega or h nu. Now what happens is that when you irradiate this light to the material, it takes some minimum amount of energy to liberate that electron from the material, which is called work function. So if W is the work function, now what is work function? The minimum amount of energy required to liberate the electron from the material. So the material will try to keep the electron, it will try to attract and keep the electron. It belongs to the material, electron belongs to the material, but but if you supply sufficient energy, then you can excite it and bring it out of the material. So the E photon, if it is greater than W, only then electrons are ejected. Okay, only then the electrons are ejected. If it is less than W, so that is what happens. So if frequency is sufficiently high, so h nu that you give, if it is greater than W, then the remaining part of h nu will come as kinetic energy. Okay, so, and this is the major formula. So h nu is the energy of the photon. So if the energy of photon is greater, if h nu is greater than W, okay, h nu will be equal to W plus half mv square, which is the kinetic energy of the liberated electron. Now you can measure the kind of speed with which these electrons come out of the material. Once you irradiate light on it, if it is coming out with some velocity, you can find out the kinetic energy, and if you add that kinetic energy with the work function, you will get the h nu value. So that was experimentally verified. Einstein theory was verified, and then Einstein was awarded Nobel Prize for this particular work. Okay, it looks very simple, but nobody knew that light is made up of particles at that time, and so it was very a very new thing. And the energy of light is equal to h nu. So that is what Einstein come up with, okay, which could explain everything that we saw with respect to photoelectric effect. So that is very strange in the sense it suggests that the quantum mechanical idea, okay, quantum mechanical idea suggests that what was thought of as wave, okay, light was always thought of as waves for many years. I mean, since Huygens principle was Huygens conducted, or Thomas Young, I think, conducted the interference experiments, it was always established that light is a wave. Okay, earlier Newton said that light is a particle, corpuscles, etc., but that was overridden with some of the experimental analysis of interference, diffraction, etc., and it was very well established that light is a wave. So for many years, hundreds of years, or more than 100 years, it was well established that light is a wave, and then Maxwell gave the complete electromagnetic theory and shown all equations, measured the velocity of light. Everything was suggesting that light is a wave, and but this particular experiment could not be explained by those theories. But Einstein came up and said that light is a particle. Okay, they are made up of photons or quantas, energy packets. Okay, and so it suggests that light is made up of particles. Okay, or particles or packets of energy. So that was very revolutionary. Now what happened after that is another development. Okay, so if a light which was thought about as waves exhibits particle nature, then the converse of it may be also true. That is, what is thought of as particle, such as electrons, okay, could be a wave also. It could have some wave nature also. So the converse, so the nature is not really stuck with one particular nature, one particular feature, that is either particle or wave. I mean, the nature is not may not be operating in that way. Maybe every entity that are in the nature has both features. Okay, so that is what de Broglie has tried to postulate. So de Broglie postulate. Okay, so Einstein said that light is particle. It is 1905. 1905 is one of the celebrated year in physics. Most of the Einstein's path-breaking, ideas or discoveries came in that year. And de Broglie suggested somewhere around 1924 that the microscopic particles such as electrons has wave nature. So there is some kind of duality. Duality means nothing is strictly particle or nothing is strictly wave. Every entity in the nature, the fundamental constituents, they have both nature, dual nature. Okay, so which is called, this is often called as wave particle duality. So it has both. So it is both a wave and a particle. Okay, so wave particle duality. So it is wrong to say that either or, it is both. Okay, that is more accurate. Okay, so then the question is that if it is so, then why in everyday ordinary life we don't see a tennis ball having a wave nature? Okay, or a stone which is thrown, we don't see any wave nature associated with it. So we need an explanation for it. So what de Broglie said is that the wave or the wavelength, okay, lambda, the wavelength associated with a particle is given by h by p. So this is his de Broglie equation. Okay. So if you use this equation, then you will see that if you want to observe this wave nature, then the momentum of that object should be very, very small. So if you take a 1 kilo, say a tennis ball, it may be something like many grams, right? It may be like 100 gram or something, weight will be there. So with 100 gram, if you, where h is how much? Here h is basically 6 point, how much it is? 6.625. Is that right? This verifies. Yeah, 6.625 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second. Okay. Okay, the unit of h is joule second. Okay, energy into time. Okay, so this is a very, very small quantity. Now if you think about some object, it's like tennis ball. If a tennis ball is moving with a velocity, say 1 or 10 meter per second, and so let's say that the mass of the tennis ball is equal to 100 gram. Mass is 100 gram, velocity v is 10 meter per second. Then what will be the wavelength? Okay, de Broglie wavelength. Okay, so the de Broglie wavelength associated with the tennis ball is basically 6.625 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second divided by the mass, which is if I convert this into kilogram, so it will be just 0.1. Okay, so this is mass into momentum is basically what? Momentum is m into v. Okay, again this is also not completely true if the velocity is very large. Okay, but for 10 meter per second this is okay. So that will go to theory of relativity and all, so we will not enter into those domain. So we are still considering things which moves at a speed much lesser than the speed of light. So mass into velocity, which is 10 meter per second. So 10 meter per second. So that 0.1 into 10, so that is 1. So this is basically ultimately, if you put everything in the SI units, so kilogram is SI unit, meter is SI unit, seconds, everything is SI unit, and what you will get is basically the answer will come in meters. Okay, so this will be 6.625 into 10 raised to minus 34 meter. So that will be the answer. So this is too small a length which you can't measure even. Okay, so the tennis ball has a wave nature, but the problem is that it is not observable with our experience or even with any of our instruments we cannot measure or observe it, and what is not able to be measured or observed, we tend to assume that that doesn't exist. Okay, that is not the case. But if you do this with an electron, the same calculation if you do with an electron, now in a material, electrons generally move at a speed which is almost like 1,000th of the speed of light. So this is with the tennis ball. Now if I do with if we consider an electron, so electron has a mass, m0 is 9.1 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilogram, moving at a speed which is 1,000th of the speed of light. Okay, roughly 1,000. So 3 into 10 raised to 8 is the speed of light. So it is much smaller than the speed of light. Okay, speed of velocity equal to say 10 raised to 5 meter per second. Okay, so this is like 1 by 3,000 the speed of light, or c is the speed of light. Okay, so moving at the speed of light, speed of 10 raised to 5 meter per second. So I am taking everything in SI unit. If I take all parameters in SI unit, I will get the final calculation also in this SI unit, which will be meters. So if I find out the de Broglie wavelength of an electron, so what is going to happen? 6.625 into 10 raised to minus 34 joule second divided by the mass, which is 9.1 into 10 raised to minus 31 kilo, then 10 raised to 5, that is a typical speed of electron. Okay, so tennis ball I took only 10 meter per second, that is also a typical speed of tennis ball, but electrons move much faster inside the material, but still it is much smaller than the speed of light. Therefore we don't need to consider theory of relativity into picture. So meter per second. Okay, so now if you do this calculation, so let's see how much we will get. So 6.625 divided by 9.1, so that is 0.728 into then 10 raised to minus 34. When you divide it by 10 raised to minus 31, you will get a 10 raised to minus 3, 10 raised to minus 3, and then you divide it by 10 raised to 5, so 10 raised to minus 3 divided by 10 raised to 5 is 10 raised to minus 8 meters. So this is what we will get. Okay, and you rewrite this, this is basically 7.28 nanometer. Okay, now yesterday I said the lattice constant of silicon, okay, is how much? It was around 5 point, let me just check it. Lattice constant of silicon is 5.43 Armstrong. Okay, lattice constant of silicon is 5.43 Armstrong. Okay, now the de Broglie wavelength of electron, we got it as whereas lambda dB of electron is, if I put it in Armstrong, it is 72.8 Armstrong. So you can see this. So these are comparable. Or in fact, you can say the wavelength of electron in the material is almost, covering many unit cell, or some 15 unit cell it is covering. Yeah. So the conclusion is that we cannot neglect the wave nature of electrons inside the silicon crystal. So if you just treat it as particles, the results that you are going to get is going to be very different. Okay, it won't be correct. So that is why we need to employ quantum mechanics in the study of crystals, or in the study of electron properties inside the silicon crystal. Alright, so we will take a break now and we'll come again after 5 minutes.